What's going on, everybody? This is Richard Hake, aka The Hawk, with the Prospect Pod. We are back again for another podcast, as you figured we would be, right? Every week we are continuing our march towards breaking down all 30 minor league systems, and this week is a very, very exciting one that's actually very close, near and dear to my heart in terms of prospect breakdowns. This is one of the first systems that I really enjoyed breaking down whenever I started getting into the prospect side. And, I've made a lot of friends with the, fellow players that are in the Cleveland Guardians system. You guys listened to a podcast here earlier a couple weeks ago with our good dear friend, Josh Wolf. He is a pitcher that's in the Cleveland Guardians system and really kind of spoke towards, what kind of development is going on here with the Cleveland Guardians. If I do slip and say Cleveland Indians, I do apologize. It's still something we're still working with. I'm pretty good with it for the most part, but you never know. It might slip once or twice in here. I do want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast, rate and review. It really does help us get our name out there into the industry. You can follow what we're doing here at the Weekly Streamer on Instagram and Twitter at Weekly Streamer. And you can follow everything that I do individually on Instagram and Twitter at Must Be the Hawk. Primarily, you're going to see a lot of prospect-based type of posts on there, and more so you'll see it more in the season whenever I get a lot of live looks, but I have been posting a lot of the live looks that we've been able to have this past season. So it's always a good time to be able to go on there. Of course, you guys, most of you are with the Weekly Streamer Facebook group. We have tons of really good conversations there, both on our private and public page. If you guys have any questions, trade advice, you'll be able to find it all there. And it is a fantastic tool for you to be able to use and be able to get all the information that you need for your leagues. So what we're going to end up doing today is we are going to jump right on into this system. Like I said, it's a system that I'm very excited about. I do want to ask my guest here today, and honestly, a great guest to have, an awesome guest. For the first time coming on the Prospect Pod, and I am very bummed that I didn't do this sooner. So I'm going to welcome in my guest now. You know him as Dodger Dave Dutton from the Full Count Pod. Dodger Dave, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great, Rick. How are you, sir?
Gosh, I cannot complain. I am talking about baseball and especially the Guardian system. I am all in, man. I am all in.
I'm all about it too. This is also a system that's near and dear to my heart too. I have this team in one of our 30-man leagues, and it's really been a fun team to have. It's really been, just seeing the system and the prospects that were in there, just really, truly an incredible team to have some fun with and break down. And now I'm going to get to have the pleasure of going over it with you.
Absolutely. And you've done a fantastic job in that team. If you guys don't know, we do a lot of 30-man dynasty leagues. We love being able to get that real GM feel, and we take over a lot of these, professional teams and kind of gear them towards what we want to do. And Dave produces winners. That's what he does. And that's one of the main reasons why he's here, helping us on the Prospect Pod as well as the Full Count Pod. So we're definitely happy to have Mr. Dodger Dave here with us today. So we got a pretty extensive list here, a lot of details. You can find these write-ups on Facebook 1 through 5 is going to be available on Facebook. It's on our private and public page. Good way to be able to go on there, find out, what's at the top end of this system. Now, if you're really wanting to try to go and deep dive and understand what's in this system, as a lot of us do, especially in the deeper leagues that we're in, I really strongly advise that you go check out our brand new Patreon page. It's the Weekly Streamer Patreon page. There you will be able to find my entire 1 through 30 write-up. We have 10 write-ups on there. 11 through 30 is ranked out, and you have 2 risers that'll be written down. And, being a member of Patreon is a great perk to have, because not only do you get these write-ups, you get all of our rankings, which they're amazing in and of themselves. And I'm not just saying that because we created it. This is a massive labor of love that we put into there to be able to give you guys the best content possible. But the Country Biscuit brought it up on the last week's pod, and I think Dodger Dave will agree 100% as well. One of the main perks to being a part of the Weekly Streamer Patreon is being included in the Discord channel. And we cannot stress enough how nice it is to be able to communicate with people like us, as well as your fellow league mates or different people who know fantasy as well, just trying to figure it out. It's good to be able to get the advice, the trade analysis, and it's all available there for you. So go check out our Weekly Streamer Patreon page today, and you'll be able to get the full breakdown of what we did here. Now, Dave, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand the reins. I'm going to hand the reins of this podcast over to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through 1 through 10 of the Cleveland Guardians system here. And I'll let you start it off for me.
Awesome. Hey, I want to back in a little bit on that Discord channel. I know one of my reservations before I affiliated myself with the streamer was asking questions like on a public forum like Facebook or things like that. I mean, you ask questions, and a lot of times your league mates are in that same Facebook group, and they're going to see what you're talking about, and they're going to get the same advice or potentially know what you're up to. So this Discord channel is, legitimately a private channel where you have the streamer experts as well as the streamer members, and you're less likely to be able to, you're able to keep secrecy and you're able to get some really good sound advice and bounce your ideas off people that are there to help. So I agree that the Discord channel is definitely a great benefit to your Patreon membership. So let's dive into this. So, Rick, let's start off with the guy that you had ranked number 1. This one surprised me a little bit when I first saw it. Definitely not. I mean, I guess your argument is sound, your argument is solid, but if you go and you look at some of the other sites, it kind of goes against the grain a little bit with your number 1 pick. So I'd love for you to tell us about it. So Rick, his number 1 pick kind of goes along with, I think, a very popular thought here at the streamer that the Cleveland Indians do just an absolutely fantastic and tremendous job developing pitching. You look at some of the young pitching that has come out of this organization over the last few years. They keep trading them off, and they keep developing more. I mean, it's just amazing how they just keep turning out top arm after top arm. So the first ranked number 1 is Daniel Espino. He's a 20-year-old right-handed starting pitcher. Comes in at 6'2" and 205 pounds, and he was Cleveland's first-round draft pick, 24th overall in the 2019 draft. So, Rick, why don't you tell us about him?
So Daniel Espino is an electric arm, right? So taken in the 2019 draft, he was taken directly out of high school. I mean, just an amazing work ethic, a kid that really just pushes himself, right? So this is a guy that ends up having 3 solid to above average pitches across the board and a fastball that is absolutely just straight gas fire coming out of his hand. And it's very, very, very overwhelming. And at 6'2", 205 pounds, he has gained some weight. This is all in muscle. I follow him on Instagram and Twitter, and it's amazing to be able to see what this guy does. I thought Syndergaard was pretty crazy with some of his workout regimes and what he was doing. Espino is right up there, man, but he does it in a very, very smart and specific way. He's not going for the massive muscle gains. He's going for, the extra velocity or the extra spin rate that he's trying to be able to get on his curveball. So like I alluded to before, he has a fastball, curveball, and slider. The slider has got very good RPMs, making it a very difficult pitch to be able to hit with a tight break. And the curveball has got, a very, very solid drop to it. The one thing, that is lagging behind here, which is normal, is the changeup, right? So we've talked about this multiple times, and we talked about it with Josh Wolf on the pod as well. Changeup for high school arms typically end up taking a little bit longer to be able to develop. But Espino has good stuff in terms of the tumble that ends up coming later as it crosses the plate. But whenever you look at what he's been able to do in 2021, it was pretty darn impressive. He ended up going from Low A Lynchburg, which is literally like 2 hours up the road from me, all the way up to Lake County. And I'm kind of bummed I wasn't able to see him in Lynchburg, to be honest with you. I tried, but I didn't get the right opportunity to be able to see him live in person. But on the season, though, he had a very, very strong start. 20 games started this year. He carried a 3.73 ERA, 152 strikeouts in 91 and 2/3 innings pitched. Right.
Wow.
So here's the reason why he's number one, because a lot of folks will be thinking about, okay, well, why isn't, George Valera number one? Why isn't Tyler Freeman number one? Daniel Espino is number one because I truly believe that this is ace upside in the making. And here's the thing. So yes, the ERA was a little bit rough. Low A, he ended up having a 3.38 ERA. And then whenever he got the bump to high A, it ended up bumping up a little bit to 4.04 ERA. This is why you do not take ERAs so much into consideration. They are very, very circumstantial on what's going on. One thing we discussed with Josh Wolf as well is circumstantial play, right? The defenders that are behind you and what they're able to do. With Daniel Espino, whenever you look at what he was able to do in 2021 in terms of keeping batters off their normal rhythm, in Low A, he was able to keep batters to a 217 average against. 217 average against, that is great. I mean, this is where, some of the top pitchers in Major League Baseball are keeping guys, at a 200 to lower. Whenever he moved up, all of his numbers, in terms of his ERA ended up going up, but his average against went down. He ended up bringing it down to a 170 average against. It was harder for those to make hits off of him. Unfortunately, he just got tattooed with the home run ball. At that point, whenever he got the bump up, he did 42 and 2/3 innings in Low A, 49 innings in High A. I really just think after coming off the 19 season, a COVID-shortened season in which that he worked at the alt site and made really strong gains, by the way, I think that you see a lot of these players, and we've done some of these systems where they end up getting the bump up, and all of a sudden, they're just kind of falling apart here at the end of the season. I think that they're getting back into their rhythm, and even Josh Wolf was saying it as well. A lot of these Guardians players that are in Low A, in particular Lynchburg, as well as, in High A, they're typically playing the same 5 teams multiple times over. And every once in a while, they'll mix in somebody different. So, as these players start to get to see what you're working with, they have a better opportunity to be able to hit you, correct? So I think Daniel Espino will be able to learn from these, little hiccups in the road. But all in all, I mean, you're looking at a lot of these like average against. I mean, he's looking like Grayson Rodriguez in terms of what he's actually being able to put up with keeping the ball away from batters. And the K rates are absolutely insane. So that's why I have Daniel Espino at number one on my list.
Awesome. Anytime you have a ridiculous K rate like that, you're definitely looking at a pitcher that has massive upside. I'll also say that to hear you describe what sounds like I've talked a lot of prospects with you, and most of the time when I talk to you, it's mid rotation, back end of the rotation type starter. To hear you talk about a true front of the rotation starter says something, because you don't give that label out very often.
No.
So there's a lot to dream on here. There's a lot to really get excited about. And what excites me the most is hearing about his workouts, because along with the workouts, being specialized and developing his pitches and things like that, he also his workouts lead to a lot more endurance that's going to help him as he advances in his career. And he's already showing really strong, really positive results. So definitely a lot to dream on. Great recap, Rick. Yeah. Thank you. All right. You alluded to this next prospect a little bit. And I'm excited to have you tell us about him. This is a prospect that I've always been a big fan of. I've tried to acquire in several leagues. Unfortunately, with my Indians 30-man team, I dealt him away. But George Valera, 21-year-old outfielder, he was signed. He was an international player, signed from the Dominican back in 2017. Comes in at 5'11" and 185 pounds. So why don't you tell us about him?
So George Valera is one of these players that is very, very difficult to kind of gauge, right? So in these, deep dynasty leagues that we're in, even in 10-team leagues, he appears to be almost untouchable. And it's pretty odd to see exactly why that is the case. It's easy to be able to see it from the standpoint that there is a lot of projection to be here, and there's been a lot of that put on him to this point. But whenever you look at what he's been able to do up until 2021, there really wasn't much to see here, right? So in 2019, you're looking at George Valera, and I'm telling you, through 19, 20, and now into 2021, you couldn't trade for this guy. You'd have to give up a king's ransom in order to get him. And I think it's because the industry has literally put him to such a point that I'm worried that he might be too high. And this might be somewhat odd hearing from somebody who has him at number 2 on the system. But just bear with me. In 2019, 217 average, a 336 OBP, 411 slug. That to me just says, eh. And that was all at 52 games at a mixture of short season ball and low A. 8 home runs, 6 stolen bases. That's okay, right? That's okay. George Valera did a lot of work in the alt site in 2020, trying to refine his hit tool because that's what was really lagging behind. It made him a major focus, working on the launch angle, trying to get to that power that people are projecting him as. I know Pipeline, has him as an above average power, above average hit. I've seen people go as high as a plus hit tool or 65, 70 grade hit tool and power tool. And I'm just like, this is a little out of hand. And I feel like that's kind of what it's become to this point. But George Valera in 2021, he was able to get his assignments. He was able to move up 2 levels, going from Lake County and high A all the way to Akron, which is double A for the Guardians. On the year, he ended up slashing 260, 405, 505 with 19 home runs, 11 stolen bases. Now, these are great numbers in terms of OBP. Anytime that you have a batter that ends up having a 405 OBP, that is elite. And that is fantastic. That's good. 505 slug, that's in the right direction. There's still more to be had there, but that's in the right direction, right? The bat is still kind of lagging behind. And whenever you look at what he's been able to do at each one of those levels, 63 games being played at high A, a 256 average. And then whenever he moved up to double A, a 267 average. This might just be who he is at this point, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that definitely doesn't mean that he's an above average hit tool, right? This would be league average, 250 to 260, and that's more than likely where he's going to end up falling at. The OBP is what's going to be able to carry him as he's able to draw a ton of walks. And that's what's great about it. He's not extremely passive. The strikeouts are actually relatively low, which is a good sight for George Valera in that matter. So he's not passive. He's drawing walks. He's making contact. So that's a good plus in that arena. Now you get into the home runs. Is 19 home runs over 86 games good? Yes, that's in the right direction. That's what you want to end up seeing. What I wish that I saw a little bit more of is the extra base hit variety, right? Because that tells me that there's a little bit more power that's in here that's not being fully, tapped into. Once again, in 86 games played, he only had 5 doubles and 4 triples. So he has the wheels to get to 4 triples, but he's not hitting a bunch of doubles. So I'm curious. Valera is kind of an enigma to me, and I think that the price for Valera at this point in fantasy is far too high to be going out there and trying to make these massive trades for. We have gone over so many different prospects already to this point, with Baltimore and Atlanta. I mean, what's the difference, in being able to pay a little bit less for something like that? If you're looking at like a Hudson Haskin, or you're looking at, Colton Cowser now, or you're looking at Jesse Franklin. You can find all these types of guys, granted with a little bit different skill sets, and you could pay a fraction of the cost and get the same results. So I know this sounds kind of like a mixed bag on Valera. I do like the upside. I just don't like where the value is in the fantasy aspect for Valera. In 2022, he should start the year in AA and more than likely make his way up to AAA. I wouldn't venture to guess that the Guardians are going to be, so bold to be able to jump him right up into the major leagues. I think that he'll have another full year of development. Hopefully that hit tool can come around. If he hits 280, then he's the truth, right? And that's just what we need to end up seeing out of George Valera.
One thing that I you and I have had this conversation many times. OBP to me, it's the most important stat in baseball, because it's definitely what the major league teams are looking for these days. The amount of times you can get on base. So to see his OBP be north of 400 is impressive. I also agree that having him ranked at with a 65 to 70 hit tool and a 65 to 70 power tool is just not realistic. I mean, he's not Tony Gwynn with David Ortiz type power. That's just not him. So I would agree with you that you should definitely temper your expectations a little bit. I think he'll be a really solid major league player someday, maybe as early as late next year. However, to your point, you shouldn't be overpaying and paying up to get this guy. He's too expensive right now, and there's definitely a better value that you can acquire at a fraction of the cost. Awesome. So this next one is this next player we're going to talk about is actually a player that many sites have ranked as their number one prospect for the Indians, and that's Tyler Freeman. Shortstop, 22-year-old shortstop. He was drafted in the competitive balance round B, 71st overall in 2017 by them, the Indians, now the Guardians, obviously. 6 foot, 190 pounds. Really good player. Player that I've had my eyes on for years. Definitely a professional hitter. One that makes really good contact. Is just a really good overall solid hitter. Doesn't have a ton of power, average power at best. But it definitely appears in my mind to be a hitter that's going to hit somewhere between 280 and 300 every year, and is going to he's going to be a tough at bat for teams. So I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you take it away.
No, he's really been a streamer favorite, and I know Ed and I have really kind of led the charge on Tyler Freeman. Not that we're like, trying to make the big push, because obviously he's pretty well known in the industry, right? What we like that I think maybe the Country Biscuit and a lot of other folks, maybe kind of fall off. This is going to be a complete hitter. And, a lot of us remember in 2019 or so, whenever Nick Madrigal was considered a prospect, he was borderline untouchable, which was very odd in a lot of different ways because there was no power. But the average, you knew it was going to be there. You knew that there was going to be stolen bases, and you're happy with that. And you knew you're going to get that at second base, right? So, Madrigal is pretty much untouchable. At the time, you had Tyler Freeman doing the exact same thing. He was at shortstop, second base. He's really playing all around the infield, and he was a fraction of the cost. I bought Freeman wherever I could. I know Ed did the same thing. And whenever you look at his numbers, throughout his minor league career for the whole season as a whole, he's never had a batting average below 297. And the 297 average that he did have was his rookie year in 2017. So this is a guy that, hits for average. He has a good understanding of the strike zone, draws walks, He gets on base. He makes solid contact. This is a guy that, at that same token, has never had an OBP below 364 either. And that, once again, was his first year as a professional. This year in 2021, unfortunately, he ended up dealing with an injury that ended up taking him out of the season. I think a season-ending shoulder surgery. On the year prior to that, he was at Double-A. He slashed 323, 372 OBP with a 470 slug. All of those are good numbers. Obviously, you want the slugging to go a little bit higher up, but OBP-wise, that's fantastic. 2 home runs, 4 stolen bases. This was once again all at 41 games. And whenever you look at what he was able to do in that short amount of time, he was able to hit, it would be 18 extra base hits. So 14 doubles, 2 triples, 2 home runs. Okay. So, and you'll see this pattern throughout his, minor league career as well. He hits doubles at a pretty large clip in terms of what he's being able to do. And one of the key points that he was trying to work on whenever he was at the alt site was working on the launch angle and being able to get it ever so slightly up to be able to get to some of that raw power that he does have. Granted, it's not going to be anything crazy. He'll probably hit for more power than Nick Madrigal. I already noted this point. He has 9 career home runs in the minor leagues. That's beat Madrigal right away. So you'll get a little bit more power there than what you will out of Nick Madrigal, and you'll be able to get a good amount of stolen bases. What does that mean? It could be anywhere between 15 to 20 stolen bases on a full season. I think that this guy might be able to get anywhere between 5 to 10 home runs, carry yourself with a great OBP. He reminds me a lot of early DJ LeMahieu, right? Colorado DJ LeMahieu, where he wasn't hitting for the power, but he'd get the gap to gap. He might not be a complete burner on the bases, but he'll steal you a couple bags, and he'll carry your league in that average and OBP. I absolutely love Freeman for what he is. Obviously the price has gone up a little bit, but because of the injury, you still might be able to acquire him at a pretty reasonable value as well.
Okay. Excellent. So I love the DJ LeMahieu, the early DJ LeMahieu.
Not Yankee Stadium.
No, all of a sudden he became a 25 home run hitter. It's like, where did this guy come from? But he was always being a fan of a team in the NL West. He was always probably one of the most underrated and underappreciated players out there, DJ LeMahieu. So to hear that comp gets me really excited about a player like this, because he'll definitely be a contributor to his major league team and ultimately to your fantasy team in the form of OBP, runs and batting average. So very exciting player. And, again, the fact that this guy is number 3 in a system is just amazing. And it speaks to the depth and the quality of the system that we're talking about tonight. So our next player is definitely one that a lot of people probably may not have been on a lot of people's radar, but he's definitely risen quite a bit over the last, I'd say, year. Tremendous power bat, and that's John Kenzie Noel. This 20-year-old first baseman was signed July 15th, international signee. He was signed in July of 2017. This is a player that, again, just huge power potential and really super impressive prospect that some of you may not be that familiar with. So I'm going to let Rick. Rick, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about John Kenzie?
Yeah. So John Kenzie is he is a freak of nature. He is awesome. I had the pleasure to be able to watch him in Low A Salem. The Salem Red Sox were playing the Lynchburg Hillcats, and he was a part of that team. And it was amazing, number one, to be able to see Noel. He looks a lot bigger, like taller wise than 6'1", and he looks a lot bigger than 180 pounds. Whenever I first saw him, this is gonna sound really weird, but he really reminded me of an old, like a very young David Ortiz. He has that body, that big bulking body. This guy is going to create some havoc for some pitchers for a very, very, very long time. And, at 20 years old, he's already being able to get it done in the minor leagues to this point. And really, I think kind of took us all by surprise, right? So this year, Kenzie Noel finally made his stateside debut. He started in rookie ball, went to low A, where I saw him, and then ended up, finishing up the year at high A. And in every stop that he was able to do in 2021, he performed very well. The funny thing about it is he actually didn't perform all that well in rookie ball for the 6 games that he was there. That was his worst for the whole season. But once he was able to get up into low A, I mean, he just absolutely annihilated the ball. For the season, Kenzie Noel ended up slashing 340, 390, 615. So, that's pretty darn impressive right there. You're looking at 19 home runs.
That's over 1,000 OPS.
Yeah.
Wow, that's like Juan Soto. I mean, I'm not saying he's Juan Soto, but that's like where Juan Soto's OPS resides typically.
It's pretty darn impressive. And then, you're seeing him with 19 home runs, 5 stolen bases. You see that there's a lot more power to be tapped into that hasn't already. In those 70 games, he had 14 doubles and 1 triple. So you can see that he moves a little bit on there. But there's a lot of raw power that is there. Most of his major power numbers ended up coming at low A, in low A, I mean, you're looking at his season-long numbers, and they're fantastic. But in low A, he carried a 426 OBP. Yeah.
Wow.
This is a guy, though, I need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. He's extremely exciting. But he's one of those players that puts the bat on the ball. He doesn't draw walks. Okay? So these OBP numbers that you're seeing, they are through the roof. They are fantastic. They are bat-to-ball hits. As he continues to move up the ladder, and I don't think he was necessarily being challenged that much in high A. Whenever he gets to double A and triple A, primarily where the talent lies right now in minor league baseball is in double A, the high, caliber talent, I think he's going to get a little bit of a wake-up call. So he needs to be able to draw more walks, which is odd to say from somebody who has such a high OBP. But he needs to draw some more walks because that bat-to-ball contact at some point will turn into ground ball hits or ground balls, or be caught in the outfield at some point because these pitchers are going to be a little bit better. And like I said earlier, he's facing a lot of the same the same type of competitive players multiple times over. So just something that you want to try to keep in the back of your mind with Noel. This is a guy that, I mean, he's just hitting the crap out of the ball. There's just no way else to say it. And that's why, I wanted to go aggressive here and move him on up my list. And, now that you're looking through the industry as a whole, putting him at number 4 is all of a sudden not looking so aggressive anymore. But, I'd like to say, I don't want to say that I was first on Noel because I probably wasn't, but I was definitely trying to hype him up on the prospect pod for you guys. Same with Vinny Pascatino and, a lot of these other players a little bit later on in the season. So I hope that you guys went out and grabbed them whenever I did bring them up. Unbelievably, side note here, I was able to pick him up in a 30-man league, just completely unowned, which is just amazing. Can't believe it. So you guys can go out there and look at this point, because he's being ranked in top 100 lists. He's actually in mine as well. In the back end, I think Eric Cross with Fantrax is a little bit more aggressive, maybe around 50 or so. So he's being traded for top 100 prospects right now. So like I said, I hope that you guys jumped on whenever you could, and you're taking the full benefits of that now.
Excellent. And I want to, Rick, I want to give you a shout out, and I want to give your prospect pods a shout out, because there are a lot of players, to your point, Vinny Pascantino, Noel, and others that you're hyping well ahead of them hitting these lists, and giving our streamers the opportunity to go out and acquire these guys basically as throw-ins. A lot of these guys have never, you've never heard of, and neither of your league mates. And Rick has given you these guys well ahead of time and giving you the ability to grab these guys and stash them and really get them for cheap. So Rick,
I appreciate
that.
That's really that's the main reason why, number one, I did this in the first place. If anybody knows me, I'm extremely cheap, and I don't like paying up for prospects whenever they're to that level. I like buying them at the bottom floor and looking at the tools, looking at how they develop, and then going up from there, right? It's created a reputation where not a lot of people like to trade with me anymore, but hey, you know what? I want you to succeed just as much as I want to, and trust me, there's tons of prospects out here. We can find another one. So I appreciate you saying that, Dave. Thank you.
You got it. All right. So our next one, we're going to get back into, what we keep talking about, a theme here, what we keep talking about with the Indians is their ability to develop pitching. So this next prospect, number 5 on the list, is Logan Allen. Not to be confused with Logan Allen, the other Logan Allen that some of you guys may have previously seen. But this Logan Allen is 23 years old. He was drafted in the 2020 draft by Cleveland as their second pick, number 56 overall. The tail of the tape on him is he's 6 foot, 190 pounds. So he made his pro debut in 2021 and was definitely dominant across high A, and actually has already been up to double A. So Rick, why don't you tell us about this Logan Allen?
Yeah. So that's always the main problem, right? All these Logan Allens, the 2 Logan Allens that we have. And unfortunately, both Logan Allens are on the same team. So that makes it even more of a problem. And for the time being, we can exactly. For the time being, we can get away with, minor league Logan Allen and major league Logan Allen. But I am telling you right now, there's a good chance we won't be able to do that much longer. And that's really because Logan Allen, to me, number one, is a stereotypical Cleveland Guardians guy. This is a guy that will not blow you away with the fastball because the velocity is going to be sitting 92, 93, right in that range. Here's where they've done such a great job with Cal Quantrill, with Corey Kluber, and really, Shane Bieber's gained velocity, but originally that wasn't what his calling card was, and this is what they're good at doing. Plesac's the same way, right? So he has got pinpoint control and can work off of a elite changeup. Logan Allen reminds me a lot of George Kirby from the 2019 draft class. And everybody's thinking about George Kirby now, and they're like, wow, this is a little bit strange, right? But it's not. Whenever you think about George Kirby coming out of Elon in North Carolina, literally, and 45 minutes down the road from me, people are sitting here like, oh, yeah, he has great control, but he has no velocity. He has no velocity. You don't need velocity. Granted, he's coming into it now, and it's making him even better, but if you can pinpoint your pitches and be able to get them to do what you want them to do, you will be successful. This is a fastball, curveball, changeup guy, 3-pitch mix, and has been able to be utilized very, very well. At 6 foot, 190, you always get the talks of, oh, well, he could be a reliever, all this other stuff. Logan Allen has gone out here and kind of just quiet all those talks. To this point, in 111 and a third innings pitched, he's struck out 143 batters. That's getting it done. And it's pretty damn good. And that's all in 19 starts. He carried a 2.26 ERA. And, of course, what you're going to love, and I love, is the fact that he kept that average against to a 193 average against. So whenever you end up having the opposing batters bat under 200, you're going to have success. You're going to have success as a pitcher, and you're going to be able to keep that going. like Dave alluded to, he was able to actually log the majority of his innings in Double-A Akron, and did it very, very well. In the 10 starts that he had in Double-A, 60 innings pitched, 76 strikeouts, a 186 average against. It went down from what it was at High A, so he got better whenever he got up to Double-A. I think that that's absolutely fantastic. Logan Allen is a guy that, from the left-handed pitcher perspective, you love being able to see this, because that is somebody who is so useful going to the major leagues and being able to be plugged in. What is he at the major leagues, right? As of right now, you got to think that he's going to end up being a starter. Does this mean that he is, an ace? He has great strikeout numbers, but I wouldn't put that tag on him. What I would end up saying is he's probably going to be a little bit safer, probably an SP3, a high-end SP3 with flashes of SP2 potential. Whenever we saw Plesac had that career year, and now all of a sudden he's coming back, I think that he can kind of sit in near that career year where Plesac is, which is very, very good. Or do what Cal Quantrill is doing right now. And quite frankly, if you're controlling the game and allowing your guys to stay in it, you don't have to have a killer lineup behind you batting, over 300 to win games if you're out here pitching like that. Logan Allen is a great ad for you in a lot of these dynasty leagues, and, can still relatively be acquired for cheap. But I think that this is a guy that will be able to help you, and keep it on the inexpensive side for pitching.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where he ends up too. I think he'll stay as a starter. I don't want to give him the tag of another great pitcher that you might have heard of in the past that didn't have velocity but managed to have pinpoint control and throw it everywhere. A guy that pitched for Atlanta by the name of Greg Maddux.
You might have heard of him.
Yeah, you might have heard of him. I mean, I think he was pretty good.
Might be all right.
Yeah, but I don't want to give him that label, but I do agree that this is a pitcher that is definitely going to be a big leaguer, and I think the tag of high end SP3, low end SP2 is probably about right, and I think that I think we're going to see him here pretty soon. I mean, he was in Double-A last year. I wouldn't be surprised if, from a fantasy perspective, if you saw him get a cup of coffee this year, maybe even. Depending on how things play out in Cleveland, you might even see him over the summer. Lots can happen with injuries and things of that nature. So, look for him to be up this year. Look for him to get his first taste of the show this year, and definitely someone that you want to. You'd be smart to get a share or two of while you still can. All right. So next on the list is again another of the embarrassment of riches in this organization. Cleveland is known for pitching, and they're also known for having an embarrassment of riches in the middle infield. Next on this list is Brian Rocchio. He's a 20-year-old shortstop, 5'10", 170 pounds, international signing from the 2017 international class. So, Rick, why don't you tell us about him?
Dave, you hit this right on the nail here. They are very, very good at producing pitchers, middle infielders. That is really what Cleveland is all about, right? And Brian Rocchio is an exciting prospect. He is a very exciting prospect that I think gets very overshadowed by, Tyler Freeman, and some of the other prospects that we've talked about that are a little bit higher up in the system here. But he's very, very good in his own right. So Brian Rocchio is a guy who ended up coming into 2021 after some kind of mixed bag seasons, right? Whenever he first got into the league, he was showing, good average, good OVP, and great abilities to steal bags. Well, you fast forward, you go into 2020 or 2019, short season ball. I mean, he really just kind of fell flat. A 250 average, a 310 OBP, 373, very little in terms of pop. Stolen bases were down. So it's really just kind of asking, okay, well, what is this player? I think he was able to kind of retool a lot during the shutdown and at the alt site. According to Josh Wolf, they were very in with what they were trying to do in the alt site. They had a plan of what they wanted to go for, and they attacked that said plan. So you're seeing a lot of these guys be able to have an uptick in their offensive production across the board. You see it with Noel. You see it, with Freeman as well to start the year prior to the injury. Now it's going all the way down to Rocchio, because you're seeing here in the two levels that he was able to do, which was high A and double A this season. He batted 277, 346 OBP, a 460 slug. He had 15 home runs, 21 stolen bases. Okay. And that's very, very solid. It's good to be able to see that power uptick go, because previously he had a career high of 5 home runs. So, tripled it. That's great. What's even more encouraging, Dave, than that is the fact that he had 26 doubles and 5 triples. So he's showing the ability to be able to have, extra base, power. This is something that can continue to develop his power, and if he continues this, going into double A into 2022 and then into triple A, potentially the majors, this legitimately could be a 2020 bat, an Ozzie Albies style bat, where he's getting 2020 and flirting in that, mid-20s range.
You just took the words right off of my tongue right there. I was thinking the exact same player.
He is extremely close. And quite frankly, he walks about the same as Ozzie Albies too. The OBP is never going to be like very high, but it'll be better than or a little bit lower than league average, and just hover in that range, right? So Brian Rocchio has been pretty impressive to this point. And you got to remember as well, like I said, he was at high A and double A all as a 20-year-old. He was extremely young for the level. Most of these, 18, 19, 20-year-olds are sitting right now in low A. That's where they're primarily being. He's been able to produce to this point. It's very impressive. This is a guy that I think a lot of folks in fantasy is kind of getting the Cleveland bump, and that just really just kind of hurts their values in terms of being able to try to acquire them cheap. Rocchio can still be acquired for a decent price, and I think that you should probably take advantage of that. And we'll get into another prospect here that's also in the middle infield that I think that you could get for a lot less, but is very similar.
Yeah, and I also want to, if I could add something, with him being 20 years old and still really growing into his body, really, 5'10", 170 pounds, and the fact that he's already hitting doubles. As he gets stronger, puts on more muscle, what's going to happen to those doubles? They're going to start becoming home runs. Yeah. So it's very encouraging to see him doing this at such a young age. I mean, it's more than encouraging. It's really exciting, actually. And it's funny you said Ozzie Albies, because I had the same thing thinking on the top of my head, and I was like, do I want to go out on a limb and say Ozzie Albies? But yeah, I was thinking the exact same player, because the stolen bases are there, the extra base hits, the pop, the 270 to 290 batting average. That was screaming Ozzie Albies to me. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Exciting. And again, I mean, I just can't I can't stress this enough. This system is just so loaded. For a player like Rocchio to not even be in the top 3 of a system like this just speaks volumes to how deep and how just impressive this system is. Yeah. Let's move along. So this next one, I don't want to say he's had a fall from grace, but this next prospect is a prospect that in the past has been ranked in the top 3 in this system, and kind of perhaps fell on a little bit of tough times, but definitely, still. Would you agree that Nolan Jones has lost a little bit of his shine from where he was?
Absolutely. And I know you and I have kind of talked about this, back and forth in private conversations. I think we just talked about it this week, actually. Mm-hmm. I hate putting him this low, because I went on the record last year whenever Ed did this write-up, and I stuck my neck out on the line for him, and I still am in, which is why I have him where I do, because I'm not completely out on Nolan Jones. I think the problem is here with Nolan Jones. Let me back up. So I think the problem that you're seeing this year with the numbers that you're seeing, and I'll go over those in a moment, is primarily induced for two different reasons. Number one, the main reason, he is far too passive. He's extremely passive. And that means, like, at the plate, he will draw 3-2 counts all day long. But he'll get caught swinging or get caught looking all the time. All the time. His strikeout numbers are through the roof. They actually went down, surprisingly, a little bit this year to where they normally are, but they're normally not good. And that's been the one thing I've been hoping that he's been trying to, like, fix. The second thing that I think really hurt Nolan Jones this year was the fact that MLB and the Guardians sent him to the MLB training school for being groomed or prepared for what he's going to end up having to face whenever he goes into the major leagues. And in doing so, the Guardians basically let him know, hey, I don't know if you know this, but we have Jose Ramirez at third. He's pretty darn good. So if you want to stay at third, that's fine, but you're going to basically live down in AAA. And he's like, I mean, I'm open to do whatever. So he was learning how to play the outfield spot. And for those who have heard players say this before or seen major league, players enough, whenever a player moves a position, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times you'll end up seeing their average or their batting skills take a hit because of it. I'm not saying that this is exactly the reason, but I have a good feeling that learning an outfield spot for a guy that really didn't really move around all that great to begin with, and then trying to translate that back into the plate kind of hurt him a little bit. So let me get into his numbers and I'll kind of explain a little bit further. He did play the entirety of his year in AAA. Like I said, this was a plan to try to get him up into the majors this year, and clearly, the Guardians could not do that. A 238 average is a career low for him. A 356 OBP, unbelievably, is a career low for him. That's crazy. And then a 431 slug is low-ish, but it's not really far off of where his career average has been. He hit 13 home runs, 10 stolen bases. The guy is a doubles machine. Even in a down year in which that he wasn't making a lot of contact, he was able to have 25 doubles and 1 triple. So, the guy has the power, which is why he's graded out as a plus power tool. Yet he's never hit above 19 home runs in his minor league career. This is because he is far too passive. This is really what it's boiling down to. He is just far too passive. He's getting too many strikeouts. The average, typically, this is what's so difficult, right? So the last several seasons, let me put it from his rookie season, he had a 257 average, 317, 283, 272, and now all of a sudden he's down to a 238. If he could just get back to his 272 average and have a over 400 OBP like George Valera is, he's golden, man. And if you could do that in the outfield, I'll take whatever you'll give me. And heck, if you can give me 10 stolen bases a year, I'll take that. I'll take that all day.
And furthermore, with Cleveland doesn't exactly have outfielders these days. I mean, they're looking for anybody and everybody that can play the outfield. So there's definitely a path to the major leagues for him if he can, get this down and get back to golden status, as you said. So,
just has to swing the bat. Just swing the bat, Nolan Jones, please.
I don't know if you remember the prospect I compared him to when we were talking about him the other day.
My.
It's a prospect that's extremely near and dear to my heart. He's actually my absolutely all-time favorite soon-to-be prospect, and that's David Dutton.
That's
Jr.
right.
He's nothing's more frustrating as a dad than watching my son strike out and not swing. He works the counts. He gets into deep counts, and then I just absolutely make him want to. I absolutely feel like making him walk home from his baseball game when he strikes out without swinging. It's like, come on,
Can't do
son.
that anymore. He drives
So,
now.
yeah, you're right. That's the problem. So, yeah. All right. Hey, really, really good stuff. And yeah, I think I'm not. I haven't given up on Jones either. I think I agree with you that there's something to be said about when you change positions. It's just a little. Yeah, it's a lot of it's mental. You're focusing on learning to play a new position, and you're just not as focused and doing the routine, normal things that you're used to doing. So you see it happen often. So I'm with you. I look for a good bounce back from him this year. One thing that concerns me is he is getting a little bit on the older side. He's been in the minors for 5 years now. So it's kind of shit or get off the pot time for him in a sense. He was drafted in 2016, so hoping that he can. I'm hoping he turns it around. I'm hoping we see him up in Cleveland this year, or at least if not in Cleveland, then traded and given an opportunity somewhere else in the big leagues.
Agreed. I agree.
All right. So you referenced you foreshadowed this next player a few minutes ago when we were talking about middle infielders. This next prospect is Jose Tenna. 20-year-old J2 signing that was signed in 2017, 5'10", 160-pound shortstop. So why don't you tell us about him?
So Jose Tenna has been one of the guys that Hunter and I felt like kind of bonded on back when we first started all this. He was a guy that was literally buried in this system, and nobody really kind of paid him any sort of mind.
Myself included.
Well, I mean, and for the most part, rightfully so, right? Prior to this, I mean, he had a above 300 batting average the first 2 years of being in the minor leagues. He had an OBP above 350, but there was no power, and the stolen bases were somewhat there, somewhat not. I mean, 10-6 isn't really crazy by any stretch of the imagination. The Guardians focused on Tenna whenever they did the alt site, and ended up working with him on trying to retool his swing, because clearly the understanding of the strike zone is there for Tenna. And you saw this with Rocchio. You saw this with Freeman. There's a pattern with what they end up doing. They go with the hit tools OBP wise. Tenna's a little bit lower on that OBP type of scale, but he fits the same narrative as Kenzie Noel, and the fact that he's an extreme bat to ball guy. And if you listen to the Chicago White Sox system, this is very similar to Leyland Sosa and Jose Rodriguez, in which that I brought up in that podcast as well. These are guys who put the bat on the ball and they make things happen. That's just what they do. They've done that in their entire career, because you look at the walks for Tenna, they're not there, but yet the OBP and the batting average has been there for the last 3 years. This is just kind of who they are. The one thing that really ended up sending Tenna to a point where now you need to start knowing who he is and understanding who he is the fact that prior to this year, he hit 2 career home runs. This year in 2021, in 107 games, 107 games, he was able to hit 16 home runs. This was all at high A. Okay? So 16 home runs, and all of a sudden, he is able to hit 25 doubles, 2 triples. Okay? Let's put this into perspective. If you took both of his prior 2 seasons, all the games that he played, added up all the doubles, he would still come up short by a good margin. He was able to unlock a part of his game in which that he can be able to hit for gap-to-gap power, let his speed take care of the difference, and get to doubles, and allow that bat change and bat speed that he has through the zone to translate into power, raw power at 16 home runs. Heck, I'll take that, man. 10 stolen bases on the year. This is fantastic. That's why Jose Tenna needs to be on your radars going into 2022. There is a good chance that, he'll get the bump to Double A to start the year. And once again, right now, stop me if you've heard this already, John Kenzie, Noel, and Brian Rocchio. Tenna's only 20 years old. He's outperforming the level in which that he's playing. It's something about these Cleveland, infielders. They find a way to get this stuff done, and I just think it's absolutely amazing. And Tenna, I mean, we're going further and further down the list. Tenna is a guy that you can get really cheap right now. You don't have to pay a ton to get him. You can have him as a throw-in some of these 20, 30-man leagues. And I love it. The Biscuit, if he'd be here, he'd be like, hey, there's a Biscuit special. Gravy all over the place. Coming down, off the ceilings, off the plates, on the floor. Get him. He's a Biscuit. Yeah, get him.
You know what's crazy?
Yes.
Tenna's not even the last. He isn't even the last middle infielder that we're going to talk about in this top 10. That's just how insane this Cleveland system is. So a little foreshadowing on my part, but definitely not a guy. Tenna was definitely not a guy that was on my radar. I'd really never heard of him, but definitely sounds promising and someone that I'm going to look to try to to acquire in trades. Nice job, Rick.
Thank you.
All right. So our next guy was a part of the infamous trade that brought Josh Swift to Cleveland. And you might have heard of a guy that there we go. You might have heard of a guy named Francisco Lindor that went back and went to New York along with Cookie Carrasco. So this next guy is another one of those pieces along with Andres Jimenez that went to the Indians from the Mets, and that's Isaiah Greene. He's a 20-year-old outfielder. He was drafted in this comp round B of 2020, pick number 69. Good solid frame, good solid projectable frame, coming in at 6'1" and 180 pounds. Definitely a lot to like here. A lot of people have compared him to PCA. In a lot of ways, very athletic, lots of different tools at his disposal, and definitely a player that a lot of people are high on. I have a few shares of him, and I'm actively looking to grab more shares of Isaiah Greene because I think, he not only does he have the physical tools and there's a lot to dream on, but as we talked about earlier, there's a clear path to the major leagues for him because Cleveland doesn't exactly have quality outfielders at the moment. So, Rick, why don't you take it away and give us a dive into Isaiah Greene?
Might have to borrow Hunter's eye black, from all the crying that I've done. No, I'm very happy that not only Isaiah Greene, Josh Wolf, Andres Jimenez and Rosario was able to get on out and be able to advance their careers, and Isaiah Greene is a big part of that as well. So going into the 2020 draft, this was a high school player that had absolutely massive upside. Once again, this was the last draft class that Brody Van Wagenen did with the Mets. And Dave, we've talked about this on the side. I've talked about it with several other people. You guys can hate Brody for what he was, but he was actually a very good person in terms of trying to navigate a draft in 19 and 20. And, you alluded to the fact that Isaiah Greene has been compared to PCA. PCA was the first round draft pick by the Mets. And Isaiah Greene was, another pick that they were able to have at the end of the second round. So it was amazing whenever we went to the fantasy side of this, right? And PCA is going, really, really early in these first year player drafts. You could sit back, wait until the third round and grab yourself Isaiah Greene. And I'm sorry, you got pretty much the same player. Isaiah Greene has got elite defense. I will be shocked if this guy doesn't get gold gloves in his career, whether it's in Cleveland or wherever he ends up. His defense and his ability to cover the outfield is absolutely amazing. A left-handed bat, you really got to love that in terms of, just a hitter and circumstantial. Any sort of infield hit, double, triple, whatever the case is, you're already one step closer to first. You're already one step, closer to going to what you need to do. And the plus speed really does kind of play up. In 2021, he was able to get his first taste of pro ball, in which that he did rookie ball. slash 289, 421, 368. You saw, a little bit of power here with 1 home run, 5 stolen bases. Clearly the stolen bases are there. This was all done at 43 games in rookie ball. The one thing I do like a lot is the fact that you saw 9 doubles out of there. Shows that there's some power still to be tapped into here. A lot of scouts put him as below average. I think that he could have average to plus, depending on how he builds into that, not plus, but above average power, depending on how he builds into his body, right? So if he can be able to kind of hold that OBP skills, I mean, you look at the fact that he was able to draw 35 walks in 43 games. That led rookie ball, and it's amazing because he's out there in Arizona. He ended up having an injury that ended up ending his season. It wasn't serious. It was just something that the Guardians ended up, just kind of shutting down. I think it was like a finger injury or something along that line. So he'll be ready to go next year. That won't be a problem, but that's why he didn't finish out the whole season. But quite frankly, he showed them everything that they needed to see. And I'm really hoping that I'll be able to see him at, the beginning of the year in Lynchburg here. I'll make the trip up there to go see him in a heartbeat. I know I always remember my conversation with Eric Cross after the draft, and we believed that Isaiah Greene was a major steal for a lot of fantasy owners. It was one of the things that, we immediately ended up saying at the same time, so Isaiah Greene is a guy that I still think that you guys can target. Relatively unknown commodity, needed to make sure that he was here in this top 10. And I'm glad that we could talk about him today.
Would you say he's maybe Jackie Bradley Jr. but with better on base percentage skills?
I think he's Jackie Bradley Jr. with better OBP, and I honestly think the bat might be a little bit better. Average wise,
Okay.
power wise, yeah, he's probably about the same in a lot of that way. But yeah, I mean, if he turns out to be Jackie Bradley, you got to be pretty happy with that. And like I said, for him to be able to be acquired for as inexpensive as he is right now, that's a win all day.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks, Rick. That's some great information, and definitely a guy that you can still target, and probably basically in the more shallow 10 to 20 team leagues, probably get him as a throw-in, because 30 team leagues, people probably have heard of him, and you're not going to get him as cheap. But in the lower team leagues, you can very easily get him as a throw-in at this point in
Agreed.
trades. Excellent. So this next player was just recently acquired by the Guardians from the Tampa Bay Rays in the Jordan Leplow trade. I guess I just gave it away because I'm sure all of you guys know who I'm talking about now at this point. But it's Peyton Battenfield. 24-year-old right-handed pitcher, really big kid, 6'4", 224 pounds. He was drafted in the 9th round by the Houston Asterix with the 286th overall pick. So, Rick, why don't you tell us about him?
All right. So, full disclosure here. There are players that are in my 11 through 30 that could have easily been here. The reason why I have Peyton Battenfield here at number 10 is because I wanted this opportunity to be able to talk to you guys about Peyton Battenfield and prepare you for what will inevitably probably end up being his quick ascension to the major leagues. I think the Guardians acquired him because he's already put in his time in the minor leagues to this point in 2019, and what he's been able to prove already to this point in 2021. On the year, he did carry a 3 ERA in 13 starts, 72 innings pitched, and 82 strikeouts. Kept batters to a 181 average against, which is extremely solid. This is a big pitcher that should be able to go out there and just be a workhorse. He reminds me a lot of, and I got to tip my cap a little bit towards this call. This is Tyler McGill of last year. So if you remember, if you listen to the Full Count pod, you'll remember, prior to the call up of Tyler McGill, I was telling you guys, grab him, grab him, grab him. He's tearing it up at AA. He's only a stone throw away. Injuries happen, and all of a sudden they got to draw from the well. This is a guy that they were able to acquire at a relatively, inexpensive cost. They can pull him up at any time. Yes, Hunter has been able to bring up to me multiple times that the innings, logged in his career are not very high, and that is a fact. It's not, but quite frankly, save your bullets for the majors, right? This is a guy that can end up coming up to the majors, and it would not surprise me at all if all of a sudden he's an Aaron Savali and he just doesn't leave. When Aaron Savali got called up, I was like, okay, when is this guy going back down? And he never did. He never did.
And he
just keeps winning. And I think that this is a guy that could do that. He's got a workhorse, body. I want to see him do, work more with the innings. Cleveland will be able to find a way to be able to make this work. And that's why I wanted to make sure that I talked about him on here. So then that way you guys can go out and acquire him, be able to, use him in some of your deeper dynasty leagues. Now, I mean, as for 10 and 12 team leagues, I think that this is a waiver wire ad. If he gets the call, if you have an empty spot on your bench, you pick him up, kind of like how I suggested with McGill. You ride it out and you see from there. If he bombs out, you drop him, you're none the wiser. In a 20, 30-man league, I know Ed Fingerhut is a big fan of Peyton Battenfield, and I need to give him the credit where credit's due because he brought him to my attention. Grab him, trade for him. If he's getting the Cleveland bump, which is what he's pretty much already done, which is very difficult, Dave, because how do you go from a great pitching organization in Tampa to a great pitching organization in Cleveland, and then you get double the cost? I don't know. But I do love me some Peyton Battenfield. So go on out there, acquire that. Should be relatively inexpensive for you.
Excellent. Rick, I just want to thank you. I mean, the 10 that you just went through, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but just such an amazing system in Cleveland. The fact that you have those 10, the fact that you have guys like Nolan Jones down at number 8. I mean, that's just ridiculous and speaks to how amazing that system is. But there's also on our Patreon page, we also have Rick's 11 through 30 rankings. Do you want to go through those, or
we will save those for you to be able to look through? But what we will do is give you 2 risers, and I know Dave, you've actually got a guy or two that you might want to try to highlight here. I'll let you actually go first, and I'll take up the rear here. Okay. What is a guy, either 1 or 2 guys that you think that not only can make the top 30, which you and I discussed prior to this might have been one of the hardest systems to be able to do the 1 through 30, because there's just so many more people outside of 30. And I really wanted to keep going, but I wanted to keep it uniform as well. Who do you think can end up jumping not only into the top 30, but into the top 10 in 2022?
I'm going to give you a name that I told you before we started that I was surprised he wasn't even in your top 30, and that's Cody Morris. Last year he had a tremendous year. I've heard his numbers, from last year described as video game numbers. Coming in with a 1.63 ERA at the AAA level. I think he's going to probably get a taste of Cleveland this year, a taste of the big leagues, and I think that he'll, we'll see what happens. But man, he dominated last year, and he's a guy that you can get on the super cheap right now. I mean, nobody really has heard of this guy at this point, and it's definitely a guy that you could, will probably be up this year, and you could definitely get on the cheap.
I like that. I like that a lot, man, and especially in some of these deeper dynasty leagues. You gotta love being able to try to go and acquire some of these young talents.
That's the getting value for guys. Getting guys on the cheap. One of my strategies, one of the things that I loved, I hang my hat on it in these leagues, is knowing when to buy and when to sell, and getting a guy like this on the cheap and holding on to him while his value goes up, and either keeping him for the long run if he becomes great, or selling him once he is close to the big leagues. You hear Hunter Rakes on the Full Count podcast talk often about the highest value a prospect ever has is right before they're called up to the big leagues. So it's definitely something I agree with, and I think of these players as like stocks. You buy low and you sell high.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, man. That is a good call. One I want to bring up here is, and I apologize to Irish. He's going to get mad at me for bringing up a catcher, but I got to bring up my boy, Brian Lavistita. All right. If you guys listen to the Prospect Pod, you'll already know that I'm very, very high on him. I was hyping him up throughout the season this year. Got some amazing feedback from his family whenever I posted onto Twitter. So they absolutely just ate that up as well. Brian Lavistita is amazing because he has done nothing but hit throughout his entirety of the minor league season. Or not season, but his entire minor league career. And this year was just, an added plus. He was able to go 3 levels in 2021, which was high A, double A, and triple A. Okay. And on the year, he slashed 289, 380, 456. He had 9 home runs, 16 stolen bases. He had 19 doubles and 1 triple as well as a catcher. This is Dalton Varsho 2.0, man. This is a guy who can literally go play everywhere. We'll have that catcher's eligibility for you probably to start his, minor league career. And this is something a little bit special, man. You could be able to pick him up in a lot of these 30-mans. I picked him up off the waiver wires once again, just under the radar type of guy. You can acquire him for next to nothing because nobody wants catchers in fantasy, apparently. I like to try to find the ones that can at least kind of, keep the status quo for a little while. This
also sounds like 2019 IKF.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would say so. And now that he's lost his catcher,
for those of you that aren't familiar with my acronym.
Exactly. Last one I want to try to bring up here before we kind of wrap this thing up. Richie Palikos, I think is the right way to say it. Palacios. I like that better, Dave. I think that's brilliant. We'll go with that. Palacios. Another one of these really, talented middle infield, outfield type of guys. And this is a guy that legitimately can, be able to crack the major leagues at some point because he's going to be 24, or he is 24 this year. He slashed 297, 404, 471 with 7 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and 33 doubles on the season. So this guy's pretty fantastic. Oscar Gonzalez. You guys saw a lot of my posts throughout the year. He's somebody who's very excited in AAA. There's a lot of fun stuff here in Cleveland. Dave, do you have any more before we head out today?
No, that's it for me.
There we go. And I just want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast, rate and review. Check out the Weekly Streamer Facebook group, private and public page. A lot of great stuff going on there. You're going to be able to see Dodger Dave on there. He's always out there, commenting on all the posts that are out there, answering your questions. So we thank you for all the hard work that you do, Dave, on a constant basis, and putting up with me in the moderators chat. That is very difficult to work with. But that in the Patreon page, like I said, I can't say this enough. The value that's in there, $5 a month gets you this entire write-up. It gets you all of our rankings. It gets you the Discord channel. And the write-ups that Matty Ballgame is doing on the pitching side, breaking down these pitchers, they're worth it. They're worth the $5 by themselves. I'm sorry. I said it. It is what it is. And from all of us here at the Weekly Streamer, make sure that you guys have yourselves a great baseball week.